very unique, very important examples that occurred, historical examples that occurred in time that set the trend. Set the trend. The question is, how did we get the trend? Remember, I said, in terms of terrorism, and I hope you follow me. This is, I don't know how my brain was able to click all of this in a second, but this is, now I'm unraveling it. So please, back up if you have to watch this so that you don't get lost, because I'm not going to get lost. But the idea is, insofar as someone recognized, wow, maximum damage for a budget. Maximum damage for a budget. Someone else saw that and saw how effective that was and then generalized based on that. What is the trend? The trend is absolutely nothing more than, I think I spelled it right, I'm not sure if it's 2 T's. It's copycatting. You copycat. You copy what the other dude did. Wow, that dude hacked the database for blah 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 and walked off with a ton of cash. Damn, I want to figure out how you did that. I'm going to hack the database for blah 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 and walk off with a ton of cash. Wow, that dude's really pissed about something, strapped a bomb to himself, walked in the middle of some public venue, blew himself up. Wow, kill a whole bunch of people? I want to do that. So then that occurs for a while, and the guy says, well, you know what, I'm going to build on that model. And rather than just have the dynamite in my body, I'm going to put shrapnel, and I'm going to wear a suit covered in shrapnel to do even further damage. And he does do more damage, and based on that damage he does, or she does, less likely, but based on that damage he or she does, the trend changes, and other people copycat this new trend. So that's what this is, right? Generalizability, and to be technical now, right? Generalizability is effectively done from a terrorist sort of external threat perspective when you see people reproducing the mode of attack. Once you see that people are reproducing the mode of attack, then you recognize that there is something within this mode of attack that is appealing, that has been generalized. We've taken one instance of attack, and now other people are generalizing based on that instance of attack because there's an effectivity in this mode of attack. Which means then, if we recognize that that's the case, from a security standpoint, we had better own the obligation of deterring and undermining the means with which that mode is effectively implemented, right? That's tricky, right? We have to undermine the means, whatever it takes to get that mode in place. So the conditions for the possibility for the mode, we have to undermine the means with which that mode is implemented. A little bit extra dense today, and I apologize if it's too much, but this is graduate level lecture, so hopefully but you can always pause it and watch it, and if you have questions, PM me or leave a comment, and I'll try to facilitate discussion if discussion is warranted. Alright, so the top of page 9 again. Identify trends. So we talked about this idea of trends, right? Identify trends that should aid policymakers in their decision-making process. Scholarship could and should aid the intelligence community in 1. Critical thinking and analysis. 2. Methodologies for greater efficiency in identifying patterns. That's exactly what I was just talking about. We recognize that this is becoming an emerging trend. It's becoming an emerging trend is a better way of saying there's a lot of people that are copycatting this seminal event. Here's the seminal event. Here's the event that led after that, and after that, and after that. We now have a trend. Within academia, I don't know that we have this, but, and I don't mind giving this out, this information out, because anybody who writes a book that's published after the upload of this video that has exactly the same content in their book that I have in my video is going to have a very hard time justifying the coincidence in the fact that their interpretation came after I uploaded this video. So I don't really, I don't really mind getting this out. But in terms of, and this is important, right? In terms of a recognition that I am obligated, in number 2, to construct a methodological approach that recognizes these patterns and the efficiencies of these patterns, the idea then becomes, and I'm not going to discuss this here, but I am going to give it out to scholars who might want to begin this research before I do. Exactly where's the threshold? Because you're going to have a threshold problem. It becomes a trend when? After the second incidence? After the third? After the fourth? When is it specifically? We know copycatting, there's clear parameters because this is borrowed from psychology, but there are clear parameters for what constitutes an instance of copycatting. In terms of a trend identification, it's not, especially in national security, and I could be mistaken because I might not have this knowledge, but I've read quite a bit. I don't know of a definitive amount, an empirically identifiable, quantifiable amount that says we now have a trend. The trend is cyber attack, the trend is bombing, the trend is kidnapping, the trend is X, right? This would be regionally specific. It might even be specific to the terrorist organization specific. These dudes do this act, these dudes do this act. It became a trend, it became a means of identification once we reached threshold X, right? So that we see that, and I didn't have this because all of this is still under, wait a second, where did I put number? Jason 4, I jumped ahead, I need to change that. 1, 2, I guess I should have put it here, yeah, I'll change that. So this should be 3, 4. 4 should be bullet point 3. But this idea of trend and the ability to assess an empirical threshold or to ascribe an empirical threshold to similar events as a trend, we then recognize that the trend becomes a means of identification, right? The trend becomes the means in which you identify the likelihood of the occurrence of these particular groups based on the way in which these trends unfold. Now, this is extremely specific, and it would help, but this is not, I mean, in terms of public discussion, it'll help. I think it'll help a lot more in terms of sort of off-grid analysis. But the idea is, if you think about any serial killer, watch any movie. I think it was in, was it Silence of the Lambs? Has it been that long since I've seen it? I forget what movie it was, but the guy put something in the victim's mouth, like a moth, I think it was Silence of the Lambs. And he puts the moth, in the death head moth, inside the victim's mouth, and every victim that was there was a death head moth that was in the victim's mouth. We start to see, now this is internal, right? This is an internal, it's not properly a trend because we're assuming different parties, and that's an assumption I wasn't clear about, right? In terms of discussing a trend, as opposed to an MO, a modus operandi, the modus operandi is usually ascribed, the MO is usually ascribed to an individual or an individual group, whereas, and I guess I should put that, right? The MO is typically ascribed to individual groups or individuals, individual, individuals or individual groups, whereas a trend is identified by the initial or the seminal event. So this is the seminal event X as facilitated by group Y, and then X is reproduced, right? The reproducibility of X. So a trend looks more like this in terms of a visual. A modus operandi is just the way that you function, right? This sounds so horrible, you know, when I kill people, I kill them in such a manner that I brand my killing with my sort of insignia. This is, you know, here's a death head moth in your mouth, right? So that the idea is that what's similar is the reproducibility of identifying characteristics. That reproducibility of identifying characteristics will vary between the MO for individual groups and the trend-based reproduction of some particular form of attack or some particular style of approach, right? So this is very important. The idea, though, is that trend is associated to some degree. I'm going to say this publicly. When I write it conceptually, I'll be extremely more rigorous in the demarcation between trends and identification. But the idea is that you can be identified by what you do. Obviously, Dr. Jason J. Campbell is identified by this. There's no question, it's not a trend for me, it's a mode of existing in the virtual world, cranking out all these videos. But you think, okay, academic professor, scholar who uploads a shit ton of videos, oh yeah, that's right, Dr. Campbell, he does that a lot. That's who he is, right? So in a sense, I become what I do, literally, which is what I want to do. I want to become, and that's the point with them. The bad guys, whoever the bad guy is, the bad guys want to